All right, 12:02 here, Chicago time. So why don't we get started? Please do stop me with questions as we go through this. I know it's going to be high level, but my goal is to at least get you a little bit more comfortable, if you, especially if you're still in corporate, fighting the 9 to 5 and are looking at potentially that path out that gives you a little more confidence that right it's absolutely doable. And I want to share some of the lessons that I've learned over the past 6 years with folks that have done it more recently, some of my own challenges, how I've overcomplicated a lot of this. And like I said, as we go through this, please do stop and interrupt me as we go through if you have specific questions. I'm happy to at the end when we're done. I think I can send I'll send the deck out as a PDF so everybody can have it when we're done as well. Let me just add this link. So in case I'm not connected to some of you folks on LinkedIn or you haven't subscribed to the newsletter or any of that good stuff, you can find the links in there. I used to send out all the individual links, but it's easier just to put them in one place. You can pick and choose what's important to you. All right, so let's get started. So again, I named this little training session, right? It's easier to find your first customer than your next corporate job, which I am 100% going to die on that hill, especially the more experienced and senior you are trying to find that next role. I just know what that job market, I know what it was 6 years ago. And I've just heard now what it is today that you're looking at probably minimum 6 months, right? 9 months, 12 months. I know some other folks have been laid off for 12 years. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on convincing you that going solo is easier because I 100% believe it is. It's different, especially if you've been in corporate for more than 10 years. It conditioned us to do certain things certain ways. And it's really hard to break that mental mindset. And the funny thing is, over my 25 years in corporate, I had a couple of entrepreneurial stints, neither of which were successful enough to keep me out of corporate. But going back to corporate was always the comfort. It may have not made me happy, but it was the path I knew. So what I'm trying to do is just show you here that there is a path out. You can actually start this while you're still in corporate if you have laid off and just searching for a job. Great chance to test this now. So I'm going to share with you again in 40 minutes or 35 minutes how to approach this. And then again, the other thing I'll qualify is that everybody on this call is absolutely smart enough to do this and figure that out on your own. What I'm trying to do is help you with the learning curve. Say, hey, here's some of the dumb things that I did. Here's things that took me longer than it needed to in order to get to this place. The other thing I would encourage you, even if you don't think that going solo is right for you, test it, educate yourself. Obviously, if you're on this call, there's enough interest to do that. At least you'll know, right? If you're going to keep jumping back into the corporate fight. You knew you tried the solo path that wasn't for you, and you can, clear, keep fighting down that path. So, anyway, corporate job search, we talked about that. Some of the benefits of going solo. When I go solo, before I left corporate, I thought it was really just you had to start a company, or when I heard the term freelancer, I thought it was Fiverr, right? Get that $10 job off of Fiverr doing marketing. I didn't realize that there was a path to leverage our corporate experience within the small business space, right? It's growing, it's becoming more common practice, but if you think the market's saturated in small businesses, no, they're not. They need help. There's only a fraction of the folks who are actually providing these services into small businesses. And I think the other common misconception is you think there's certain other skill sets that you need. And I mean, it's honestly, we'll talk about this during the session, is it's really about problem solving, and you're just doing it at a different level, right? In corporate, you've been doing it again for 20 plus years. You go super deep. When you work with small businesses, they need the foundational level. That's one of the bigger adjustments that you need. But again, there's not a skill set difference. I think one of the things I always thought, oh, people who are entrepreneurial started their own companies, they must be smarter and know something different. Honestly, it's the reverse. They just didn't have the fear. They're like, I'm done with corporate. They just don't see corporate as a path. And they started a company. It wasn't, they had some unique skill set. They just had the courage, I guess, to take that first step and do it and just kind of not look back. Because I will tell you, there's people that are successful and you can define success how you want that have gone solo that have like zero skills. but they've got six-figure businesses because they're not afraid to have the conversations. They're not afraid to, again, we're in corporate, we're put in a box, don't fail, don't rock the boat, don't do these other things. As a solo, nobody's judging you. And the folks that are getting ahead are the ones that actually not overthinking it, having conversations and figuring it out as you go along. So if you take anything away from this, know this, that you do have the skills. Everything that you've learned in corporate more than applies. And that's why you see some of the data that shows that older entrepreneurs are the ones more successful because we actually have skills. We've learned some things, we have experience. So just set the table. Everybody on this call has enough experience to do it. It's just, again, part of it is going to be lifestyle, and where you want to spend your time. So, all right. So today, four things that we're going to cover: foundations, the 111 framework. This is my foundation to you, is how to get started. And we're going to dig into it. It's not super complicated. I want, again, by the end of the week or in a couple weeks, if you're super serious about this, there's no reason why you can't start having some conversations with some folks. Networking 101. The one thing that is universally true with solos, and I don't care if you're a solo consultant, fractional, setting up small services, whatever it is, 90% of the business is going to come through networking or your network, which you can expand and grow. I do believe that there's a path locally, if you can work with local businesses as well, not necessarily in your network. And we'll get that. And then just kind of sales 101. Because I think that's one of the biggest things I hear from folks is, well, I'm not a salesperson. There's no way I can close deals. I said, if you've landed a job, you've closed a deal. It's the same general idea, and we'll get into that. So foundations, I've got a few slides here. This is, again, coming from corporate. My sole mission leaving was to make more money, replace my corporate income and make more money, prove them wrong, chip on my shoulder that I know I can do this. But as I've been out and talking, I had 1,000 conversations with folks that have now left corporate. And the one thing that, again, financial is not going away. Got to pay the bills. Very few of us are in a position to be able to just retire when corporate ends up quitting on us, riding off into the sunset. And a lot of people still want to work, but just on your own terms, doing your own thing when you want to do it. So again, this isn't something that I started with when I left, but over time, I just realized how important my time actually was, money was, but then the other things that a non-corporate life gives you is, kind of that financial independence. You may feel that you're independent in corporate, but as soon as corporate goes in a different direction, does layoffs, whatever it is, you're no longer financially independent, right? So being able to control that income is really important. The other thing I found was, I call this 5 F's for a reason: friends and family, right? Did you have enough time for relationships? Can you spend time with the family when you want to do it? And in corporate, I didn't. I built everything around that corporate job. Sure, I took time off. We did vacations, but I had to coordinate that with somebody else. Fitness, this wasn't a big one for me. I had to fit that into the apps, but it's really about mental and physical. I was not in a good place at the end of my corporate career, and I didn't realize it at the time. On the surface, everything looked good, but it was my wife who said, probably after I was out of corporate for years, she's like, "What the hell was the matter with you?" Right? Again, on the surface, it looked good. The job was good. They paid me pretty well. It was generally work I liked, but I wasn't climbing that corporate. I had no desire to climb the corporate ladder anymore. I just didn't have, kind of that purpose. But also physically, I wasn't in the best shape. I didn't have the time, or I didn't make the time for it. So what I encourage you to do is, take this, fill out this scorecard. Again, it's not complicated. I do this now on a quarterly basis to make sure that I'm still heading in the right direction. My score when I was still in corporate, when I backdated, it was super low. And now I just use this as kind of the guiding light to say, all right, what's important to me? Am I getting closer to this? So again, we're never going to be ideal, right? If you have to spend any time working, you're not going to get to that point. But I think you might be surprised at how low your score is. And again, once you're out, you realize how much more opportunity there is. So the other concept too, I think was super helpful, and this is a newer realization for me, is even in corporate, you are a business owner and you have one client, and that's your corporate, your employer, right? That is it a good deal for you? Maybe they're paying you the right amount of money and you've got enough flexibility. You can work remote. You don't have to work on weekends. You're not doing busy work. There's folks that this actually works for, but I think this helps to start switching that mindset a little bit, especially if you haven't done anything entrepreneurial in the past. Reframing this is helpful. I've actually had folks in the collective that went back into corporate for one more paycheck. But the difference was they went in eyes wide open and saying, "Hey, I need to go build this for my to get build a runway, but I'm going to negotiate this on my terms as much as possible." And knowing it's more of a transaction with this business than it is the old employee employer relationship. So I think just flipping that and saying, "Hey, this is my one client. Is it a good deal for you?" Maybe you don't have it set up, you don't have anybody else in the pipeline, but and if they're taking advantage of you or you're not getting out of it what you need, yeah, that's a good first step as to, thinking about going the solo route. All right, this is another big one that, everybody undercharges when they leave. And there is absolutely no perfect way to figure out, what your market value is, but this ratio actually turned out to be surprisingly accurate. And once you get started, you can charge more. Again, if you're an AI expert in some very unique domain space that you're going to get paid a fortune for. But I use this with folks just to say, hey, here's what you can expect, right? It could be up, it could be down. As you get started, you may discount this a little bit to get some of your first clients, but this is really a good way to think about from a budgeting standpoint, right? How many clients would I actually need to replace my corporate salary? How many hours would I need to work in order to make this happen? And I always use the 100K just as the baseline, right? So it's 125K in benefits, right? That's your insurance, overhead, whatever else is in there. Drop those three zeros, and that's about what your go to market rate would be, give or take. I've actually tested this with the solo consulting community, the head of Fahim who runs that, and then also John Arms and his fractional community say, hey, is this realistic? Is this a good baseline? Are you seeing these types of numbers? And it was a resounding yes. Again, it's not perfect. I'm not going to guarantee you that these are the numbers, but as you start thinking about budgeting and planning, this is a great baseline to show you what your market worth is. I had an advantage because of the tail end of my corporate career. I went into management consulting, which if any of you are thinking about that, talk to me first and I'll advise you not to go down that path. But what it did teach me was what my market value, because I know what they were building me out at. Whole separate story of why it chased me out eventually. Again, I think having these numbers just to help you think through what's available or what's possible is a good first start. All right, so that's the foundation piece of it. Let's get into the 111. Well, actually, before I go there, anybody have any questions on that? Uh,
Brett, you caught my attention when you were talking about consulting, and you said not a path to go down. Can you just kind of expand upon what it's a broad field. I mean, I used to be in consulting, but what are you referring to specifically?
Yeah, I mean, it was just the relation. And here's the ironic thing about this, right? So I had left corporate, went into I thought it was going to be a sales consulting type of a role. So I'm like, my background's in go to market. Somebody's actually in the sales and consultancy space. Went to work for a company. It turns out they were just a sales training company and wanted me to do training. I'm like, there's no way. That's not what I want to do. And so I ended up with a contract a consulting gig with a traditional management consulting firm. Hindsight, it was a 6 month, at least it was going to be at least 6 months. It was work I knew I liked, paid me pretty well. And instead of building my solo practice with that as the baseline, I convinced them to bring me in full time. And it just sucked me back into that corporate where I didn't get the support that I thought that I needed to help build out what we need from the practice. They were actually billing, I was only getting paid half of what they were billing me out at. And it was just, early in your corporate career, you'll speak your peace of mind and then just let it go because management says we're going another direction. I just found myself at that point in time disagreeing with a lot of the directions that the senior was going, and I couldn't let it go. And the breaking point for me was my role was unique because I had to bring in revenue. So it was part sales, but part delivery, as in most management consulting firms. So even though I was crushing it on my revenue side, I was short on my billable hours. So they wanted to send me to the West Coast to manage some small implementation that really wasn't even my background. And I said no. So at that point, I should have known that my time was ticking on the clock. But I was just fighting too much of the political stuff when I actually could have done the same thing going solo. And that's exactly what I did. But I thought it was going to be a better flavor of management or corporate, but for me, it wasn't. So it's a little helpful. All right. So this is where that's a collective me as we get started is thinking, oh, well, what can I do on my own? What does my skill set allow me to actually charge for? Where can I help folks? And if you've had a longer corporate career, even shorter corporate career, there's probably a lot of different things that you've done that you're qualified to do. And the easy thing is I can do all things for all people. And that's the absolute worst thing you do when you get started. And so I really, really, really encourage folks to pick one problem. And I think that's one of the bigger mindset shifts that you have to have coming from corporate. Corporate, everything was defined by job descriptions, right? This is what I did. This is a role that I was in. This is what I get paid to do. The fact is small business owners don't care. They don't even know what half the job positions are. They just know that they've got a problem doing X, Y, and Z, and they need help solving it. And so if you can break it down to one problem that you solve, and again, probably 20 different functional areas within a corporate, it doesn't matter. These small businesses are going to have the same types of problems. And, it may be, like I said, their CRM, they need to implement a CRM and they don't have it, or they don't have clean data, or revenue is falling, or the retention rate with customers. You name a problem a business had, or a problem you were fighting within corporate, the small business is going to have that. So pick what that one problem is to get started. Pick one target. So this is your ideal customer. Again, maybe if you're in financial services, you'll target smaller financial service firms. If you're in healthcare, same thing. I didn't do either one of those, so I avoided those, right? I don't understand the regulations enough to be able to target that. And then come up with one offer. And it's really, again, a simple offer, right? And I'm going to share kind of why my story was backwards. Because when I started, I only wanted the bigger deals. I started with, again, solo consulting. I was only looking for the six-figure deals. I was meeting with companies. I was listening to their problems. But unless they were ready for me to come in and do something transformational, I just didn't push it, right? So there's a big opportunity. I left money on the table by only looking to solve the super big deals when there's actually a lot of money to help solve some smaller problems. But so let me kind of reshape how I was thinking about it. Because I in corporate and even management consulting, I was working with B2B companies with digital transformation, which sounds cool. And people are like, oh, that's awesome. But talk to a small business owner, they don't know anybody that needs B2B digital transformation, right? So I ended up refocusing my efforts on an old acronym that a boss of mine many, many moons ago talked about, which was AR&E. So acquisition, retention, expansion. Those are really the only three revenue levers in an entire organization. And so I super simplified my message that says, hey, I help small businesses with revenue across these three areas, right? Do you have a strategy for each of these three? That opened the doors because when I was talking to people and out networking, which we'll get to in a second, they understood, oh, he's the AR&E guy. He helps companies, small businesses with revenue. I was still opportunistic with other things that came across my plate that people needed help with. But I think just to get started, it's really important to find, again, that 111. What's the easiest way that you can solve this? And I would also encourage you to think about what's the kind of the smallest common denominator of solving that problem. Because if you can solve, charge $1,000 for maybe 2 hours of service a month, you can start to stack those versus just looking for the bigger deals. And I know I'm going down a rabbit hole with this, but again, so I would highly encourage you to think through the process of, again, what you're doing in corporate, what you like to do, where you've had success solving those problems, and then kind of identify what is that problem that you're solving, who's your ideal target. Again, pick one. Again, a lot of things I did went across the board. Well, again, let me simplify this back to what I ended up doing. My one problem was growth within an organization. I focused on the three revenue levers that they had, helping them put strategies. The target, which for me was small business owners between 1 and 10 million in revenue. I knew that if you can get to $1 million in revenue as a small business owner, the odds are you should be able to get to 10 million. And the stat I use quite a bit is, 99% of companies, or one out of 100, go from 1 million to 10 million in revenue. And to me, that's not a client problem. That's an execution problem. You haven't figured out how to scale from that. If you can get to $1 million, you got good clients, you got a good product. And unless you're selling just one product for a $500,000, there's no reason why you can't. Anyway, so that's who my target was. And then the offer where I ended up simplifying, because I went in initially with, again, the big consulting deal or the fractional deal. Not everybody knows what fractional is, but once I finally scaled that back to focus on the growth problem, that made it easier. And the last thing that I'll kind of say on this offer is I would encourage you, you don't have to have this fully defined as you go in. It really is listening to the client. In the way, the analogy I'll give you is when you're interviewing for a job and you're talking to your potential future boss and you're asking about the organization. What are the challenges that they're facing, specifically around the area of where your role is going to be? You're curious. How is it running now? What is the challenges with its running? You're going to hear that and think, can I solve this? Is this a position for me within this organization? Does my skill set match it? And it's the same thing when you're talking to the business owner. Get them to talk about what are those challenges. And as you're thinking, you're like, all right, this is how I would solve this. And the way I would say, even though I have one offer, I think it's just really around different levels of effort to solve it, right? Maybe they're not ready for fractional. They don't want to bring somebody in for 10 hours a week to do this. Maybe they just need a few hours a month of somebody as a sounding board to help them think through a specific problem that they're having within their business. Again, you can charge the 125 or 200 an hour to start building. Except I find this quicker you can get to that first deal, the easier it is to start stacking them. If you're just holding on for those, use that sports analogy, the home runs all the time, you'll get there eventually. You will find that business owner that needs help that will bring you in, but you could have put, 5 or 6 runs on the board with singles and doubles with some of the smaller deals. Again, this is from lessons that I've absolutely learned the hard way doing this. All right. The other thing to think about, so think about solving that problem and how you can solve for the business. There's really only three, I guess there's four ways to create value for an organization. So if I solve this problem, is it going to save the business owner time? End of the day, they care about saving time. Are you going to make them money? Are you going to save them money? Or are you going to reduce risk? Reducing risk is becoming a bigger variable for these small businesses. So as you go back to what your offer is it going to help and make an impact in one of these four buckets? And ideally, if it can impact more than one bucket, it's going to be an easier sell for you. I share this just as you're thinking about it, because in your world, it may mean you understand the value of doing whatever it is. But think about it from the business owner's perspective. These are really the only four things that they care about. And money tends to be the one that leads. Risk is starting to grow, and they know if you're in a smaller business, they're in too many different areas of the business. They don't have the time. But just think about this as you're having the conversations. This is what they care about. All right, networking. Again, I like acronyms and I like to keep things simple. And so now you've got your 111 offer, and you're thinking about, I know I can do this but I just want to get started. How do I get started? And to me, the easiest one is use your network, but target who you want to talk to. Think about it from your ideal customers. Who in your network would have access to your ideal? Because if you've been in corporate for a while, it may seem like all of your network is tied and only knows corporate, but you'll be shocked at how many people outside, those folks actually know and can make introductions into. So spend some time, go in through your LinkedIn network, see who you know. The other thing I encourage folks is, if you're going to start reaching out, make sure I start with the folks that you'd love to be able to touch base with again. Maybe there was somebody you worked with 10 years ago, you haven't talked to them, but you enjoyed the time working together. Those are the folks that I would start with first. Um, so target is, again, who you're targeting, that small business customer who has access to them. The intro shocking thing is I always lead with, hey, I'm starting my own thing, or I'm thinking about starting my own thing. If you're still in corporate, you got to be careful who you're talking to. You're not just going to blast that out and say, hey, I'm starting my own business. But if you're selective with those intros, people it's amazing how much people want to help you with starting your own business. They're helpful when you're looking for a job. They're 10x more helpful when you're looking to start your own business. Either they're still in corporate and jealous or excited or can see those possibilities, or they're already out and understand, right, the value of being outside of it. So I always launch with that piece. Another small nuance to this is that ask for advice, not feedback. And when I first heard this advice, I'm like, well, that doesn't, why does that make sense? But advice, it's more forward thinking. Hey, if I'm starting my own thing, here's what the problem I think these small businesses have. I'd love to get your advice on this because if you ask for feedback, they're giving you feedback on something that you've already built or thought about, where advice is you're bringing them in as part of the conversation. And again, it's a super simple thing. This does not have to be well scripted, but just a general idea that, hey, I'm thinking about starting my own thing. I'm selling these small businesses, would love your advice. Or do you know anybody, right? This is where we're starting to get into, hey, any of the decision makers are my ideal customers that I could talk to. And when you first get those, well, I'm kind of skipping ahead to the ask, but the idea is you're not going straight into pitch mode with this, right? Again, you're starting your own thing. I want to solve this problem. You get in front of a business owner that has this problem and you're explaining how you're working, how you're thinking through it, if they have that problem, they're going to say, is this something I can work with you with? Right. But where most people make the mistake is not that follow up ask. Do you know two other business owners that may have this challenge that I could speak with? And the way I would approach it is, especially if you're still in corporate, is you're going to learn. You're going to learn a lot having conversations with these small business owners. And again, you're going to eventually sell somebody, but the knowledge that you get just by asking the questions, it's going to refine what that offer looks like as you go through the process. Why this doesn't work for most people is they never have these conversations, right? They don't outreach or they talk to one or two people and say, oh, my network isn't, primed or people don't know this in that area. But I think just having, again, thinking about it from a more macro standpoint that, yeah, in corporate, I didn't use my network other than for job searches or if there's vendors or helping some folks do some things. But when you start to build this out, and again, if there's a way you can add value back into the folks that you're talking to, that's fantastic, right? Because you don't want to do ask, 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 but the ask isn't a big one in this. So, again, my advice here is have the conversations, start with some friendly folks, and you'll be surprised at how quickly it can exponentially grow your network just by getting new introductions. The last piece of advice I'd have for you on this is you think about there's really two types of connections. One is the network or somebody that has access to who your ideal client or customer is. And then it's the client. One of the mistakes that I made and did for years was taking any and all networking meetings, if I was reaching out to folks that weren't going to be able to help me in one of those two areas. Not that I don't want to have conversations with folks, but if you have limited time, be more targeted with it. Over time, you can start to expand and then bring other people into it. But just think about this. If somebody has access to your clients or an actual potential client is where you want to focus early on. So I'll take a breath to see if anybody has any questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, quick comment, quick question. Great. I love the
Yeah.
framing. This is Peter Horwich, Brett. So, what's your advice about picking a certain industry that you're familiar with or going broad and, where your offer has opportunity to land and stick, which might be an industry outside of where you spent your time?
Yeah, I think again, my whole goal and where I've really changed my evolved my philosophy on this is, man, how do we make that first dollar?
Yeah.
Right. And it's probably going to be in a network that I know better. Like I said, I'm not going to venture into healthcare or financial services now. I'd be more comfortable knowing a little bit of the nuance, but is there something, right? So if I was in software or in tech, go find a small tech company because you know how those things operate. If you're in distribution or manufacturing, those are probably the path of least resistance. And it's probably where you have the most network. The one thing that I will tell you is, and I did a poll on this, which kind of surprised that some people are more comfortable reaching out to strangers than they are actually people in their network, which I get, but I think if you're more comfortable and have a plan, it makes sense. I think that there's a big opportunity just in your own backyard, thinking about it networking or from a local standpoint. right? Because I'm in the suburban Chicago. And so within the Western burbs, there's probably what, 2,000 of these businesses under 10 million in revenue. And the way I would approach that, or I started approaching this, and now I'm actually going to do it with the new service I'm launching, is go back and because you're both in the same neighborhood or in the same area and say, hey, I'm a new business owner. I'm just looking to connect with other business owners within the area. You can strike up the conversation, buy them a cup of coffee, see if you can get some feedback. I think there's a really big opportunity local to, even though they're not in your network, you have a common denominator, which is you're both in the same area. You probably know some of the same people, right? And you do have the ability to go buy a cup of coffee or lunch or breakfast or those types of things. So I know I took Peter a little bit further down the rabbit hole, but I mean, I think whatever is comfortable. Because again, I think the key to this is to have that first conversation. And if you meet with somebody and it's outside of your area or industry, and you're listening to the business owner and they're speaking a foreign language, it's probably not a good fit,
Yeah.
right? But short of that, I think the one thing that I definitely found was, and part of that was the challenge coming out of management consulting, is everything is 3 levels deep: level one, level two, level three, right? You got to have your everything outlined. Everything these small businesses need are foundational, right? So even if it's not in your area of expertise, there's a good chance you're going to know more than the business owner in a lot of different areas that you could add value to them up front without even getting into your level of expertise. Again, that's my advice to people. Just get started, have those first conversations, and then it's going to start to think, all right, this is where my messaging's off. Maybe the problem I'm looking to solve isn't that big of a problem, or they don't view it as a problem, and then it can start to solve. But so many people sit back and wait. Again, we'll talk about later, but the perfect website or the perfect networking call or the perfect offer, and it just never goes anywhere. And I had a buddy who used to tell me all the time, done is better than perfect. So
Mhm.
even if it's not perfect, connect with it and go from there. Hopefully that's
Thank
helpful.
you. Yes, it is.
Awesome. All right. And I kind of cheated on this before, but again, 90% of, deals and solos come from either your network or your future network that you're going to build. Rarely is it coming from a content piece or anything along those lines. So if you think you need to build out all the marketing and the collateral and do social media and those types of things, that's not really the way this works. And the beauty is you don't need a ton of these clients for this to work. And I probably should have touched on that earlier in the presentation, because in solo, I think a lot of the times when we think we're starting our solo businesses, we need, 50 or 100 clients. Most of the time you can replace, if you're going to do fractional, 2 clients is probably going to replace your corporate income. So it's really about what you want with money, and you just can get super targeted with the number of clients that you need. So I think that's part of what slowed me down early, was thinking I need to have all these clients. I need the perfect website. I need that conversion. I need the social, and those just, it matters in the sense that it's helpful to get your point of view across on certain things. But the fact is, it's your network and your future network where these opportunities are going to come from. So challenge this week: if you haven't done this, go through this process, reach out to 3 people in your network. I've got 20 in here, and that's for the folks that are super far down the path and ready to go, or you're gung ho and say, I'm ready to do this. But at least start with 3 people. Have 3 conversations, 3 people you can trust, in the sense of they're going to give you some feedback. Maybe somebody you haven't talked to or a year or 2 years, and just kind of outline what you're thinking and get that feedback. Because again, the more comfortable you get having the conversation, the easier it is to get the entire ball rolling and you get those deals. Sales 101. This is going to seem like it's a super complicated process, but it's really not. At the end of the day, I joke with people that sales finally caught up to me, because I am not a used car salesman. And you'll see at the pitch at the end, I'm not even a hard press you guys on anything to join anything other than say, hey, it's available to you. But again, this starts with reframing, and don't think of it as selling, it's problem solving. And hey, if I solve this problem and there's just a fee, this is what I charge to get this problem solved. Nobody's expecting stuff for free. But again, this is where a lot of folks in corporate that have never had a sales role, which is 90% of people, right, aren't necessarily comfortable or don't think they have this skill set. But it really is about solving that problem. And what I'll share with this sales process is, again, I don't even like the word discovery because that sounds too salesy in the sense. But really, what you want to have is a conversation. Again, we'll use business owner, just listen, right? If 80 to 90% of what you do is listening, you're going to be super successful. The more they talk, the more they're going to sell themselves on the opportunity. Don't think that you have to step in and sell your credentials. They'll double check, right? One, they just want to know if you can solve the problem. And two, again, thinking through how you solve that, again, is going to depend upon how big of a problem they view. And again, that's part of problem selection, et cetera. But I'm just going to give you some sales numbers from back my last corporate role. So that's before I went in consulting. I was curious about who our top sales reps were and what were they doing and what were they doing different, because the quality or the performance was drastic. And so when I talk about this, we had enterprise sales reps. So we're going after our biggest clients. We had just regional sales reps, and then we had inside, so the phone based folks. The top sellers, and across those boards, their clients viewed them as problem solvers, not as sales reps. And if there's any sales reps on the phone and you sell an enterprise, there's a whole different value selling into enterprise. But what I'm talking about is these phone-based sales and smaller deals. It really is. Did the client view you as somebody that can solve this problem? And that's the communication, right? That's what you want to build with these relationships with these business owners, that you're a problem solver. You can solve this for them. And they have a high degree of confidence that you're going to be able to do that. Yeah, I use another example. If, from a corporate, a number of years ago, Microsoft basically eliminated a lot of their sales reps and converted their sales engineers into sales roles because the sales engineers knew how to have conversations with customers. And this is where your experience, expertise, the fact that you've been solving these problems on the biggest stage for, 10, 20, 30, 40 years in some cases, you have instant credibility with what you're doing. You may not feel like it, but you absolutely do. And then when you're looking at, the closing of the deal, it's just like this is how much it costs to solve this problem. And so I know it's super simple, but this works for me, right? Yeah, there you go, Rich. I'll always be closing, right? It's always be solving is a better way of thinking about it. And right? If you're solving a problem, they're going to pay people to solve those problems. And what they don't want to be is sold to, right? Again, I think even when I was in corporate, or in consulting, and I was selling, you always lead with, here's our capabilities deck, right? Don't care, right? This is the problem I solve, how I solve it. Ideally, if you have a unique twist on how you solve it differently, and the fact that you're coming out of corporate, and I will love to use call it a pitch, if you will, that, man, I'm doing this. I want to help small businesses succeed, right? They haven't had access to talent like you in the past. And now you want to do that. So it's like the problem you solve, how you solve it differently. And then the last one I usually use is proof, right? What are the proof cases? And the fact is, if you haven't done it for a small business, that's okay. They can see your LinkedIn profile and see you've been doing this forever with really big companies, right? If you're coming out of corporate. So really and there's probably a whole session on the sales piece, but what I wanted to do is just kind of demystify it a little bit for folks that don't think they have sales skills, because you really don't need them. If you have confidence in your problem solving, and you get, again, one thing that I will say that you're going to have to get comfortable with, asking for the deal, right? You can set up, and basically an easy way to position this is, hey, there's three ways that I definitely can, Mr. or Mrs. Business owner, absolutely think I can help you. I can solve this problem for you. And here's three ways we can do it. Right? The easy one is couple hours a month, right? Use me as a sounding board. I'll help you think through whatever the problem is. Second one is, call it more advisory. Again, you don't have to put a label on it, but maybe it's 5 to 10 hours, or it's a small project to help them come think through a solution to it, all the way to bring me on full time or as a fractional. I say full time, fractional, 10 hours a week. I'll take the ownership of this. I'll build it out for you. I'll lead this sprint. Almost always they're going to default to the middle option, right? And again, I'm going to tell you, don't overthink this at all. Think about the problem. You're going to understand how much it costs, and you will undercharge with the first one, and that's okay, right? You get the proof point, you start to learn what you can and can't do. But again, there's so many people that just get stalled looking for the perfect deal or not having the conversation. Hopefully this gives you just a little bit more confidence if you didn't have any in sales that you don't have to have sales skills for this to work. Common objections, again, that's getting a little bit further into it. But again, one of the things that I still struggle with is never apologize for your pricing, right? You've earned the right to ask for the price you do. There is a value to closing these deals or solving the problem for these customers. Couple other just tips, right? And clear next step, I think is always helpful because if you don't, then it just sits out in the universe and you don't make it. You'd rather get to a no versus having it linger for 6 months. Summary after every conversation, just say, hey, here's everything I heard. Here's some things that you could do. Try to add value with the conversations, right? It's not about pitching, but man, if you hear something in the conversation that you can help them solve, just talking through it, solve it. Again, we talked about the offer as an evolution and speed of learning and getting it right for 100%, right? I'm still learning as I go through this process. And again, I think the other thing that I've learned is no one's judging me, right? In corporate, if you pitch the wrong proposal internally or anything along those lines, right? It could impact your career. Here, nobody's judging you. One client, right, isn't going to be the end, and you're going to get a ton of learning from it. So the only person that's judging you going forward is going to be you, which is a hard habit to break. But once you do, then this gets a hell of a lot easier. Let's see, just a couple more slides. All right, so this is what do I need? I get this all the time. What do I need to get started? Do I need an LLC? No, especially if you're still in corporate, you can start to have these conversations. You can sell the first deals. Now, what I have found with folks is that once folks get serious about wanting to do this and they see this as a path and they really want to test it, setting up an LLC is kind of a mental milestone that pays dividends and it doesn't cost a ton. So if you want to set this up as an independent and maybe as you're networking, say, hey, I've even set up the business and LLC, absolutely can do it, but you don't need it. Do you need a website? Absolutely not, right? I'll use the Corporate Escapee as an example. It was 12 months plus before we had 2,000 people in a Slack group. We had 150 people in a paid group with no website. Especially if you're selling into small businesses, right? Worst case, they're going to check your LinkedIn profile just to see who you actually worked for and where you worked. Websites are nicer to have. It becomes a nice to have, not a need to have. Bookkeeping software, again, out of the box, you don't need it, right? Because you could use Venmo or some of these others for your first deals. QuickBooks is $19 a month, right? Is it the ideal software? No, but once you start to sell a couple clients, it's an easy fix. And then once you go full time, then there's a whole host of other options. But don't let that slow you down. And if your first idea doesn't work, welcome to the club, right? I'm probably on idea 100, and the beauty of it is experiment, right? Experiment and see if that works. Again, from my background, I started solo consulting, went into fractional, figured out, I think at last count, 10 different ways to monetize that corporate experience. Some were better than others. And what I find now is there's just a path that the experimentation is a really good thing because you may uncover something that you didn't even know that it was an option, right? You may have uncovered a different type of problem that wasn't even in your background. The one thing I would caution you against is chasing too many shiny objects up front, right? Keep a list of things that your possible opportunities. But as you're just trying to get those first deals, go back to that 111. And if you're not having traction with that first problem, figure something else out. But I think odds are you will find something because vast majority, 80% of the people will never even have those first conversations. So the fact that you're even this far puts you two steps ahead of almost anybody else that's thinking about it. So I'll leave you with the three stages of escapeism as you're thinking through where you're at right now. First one is realization, right? You're in corporate, you realize it's either broken or it's no longer working for you, but you're not sure if you see a path out. Most of you are probably outside of that, or you're just in what I'll call the awakening phase. you're starting to realize, huh, there is alternatives out there, but does it work for me? Will this work? Can I take this risk? Which I'd argue there's less risk going down this path than maintaining corporate, but separate conversation. And this is where you're testing and you're starting to think, you're educating yourself. Is this a path? Do I want? Hell, you may want to open a franchise, start a restaurant. The paths are wide open. I still think monetizing your corporate experience is the path with least friction, the easiest to test, easiest way to start making money. But there is no one path. But the last one I've started talking about this a little more recently is the WTF moment, right? If anybody remembers Risky Business, and he basically thinks he's going to the university, or Tom Cruise thinks he's going to the University of Illinois. So every now and then you got to say, what the f? Shoot your shot, right? And to me, this is where everybody, I should say, very few actually get to this point, right? You see, here I am, exactly, because we're too afraid. We have the WTF moment of corporate's broken. What am I going to do? But then you never get to that point of just letting yourself go, have that conversation. Say, "Oh, what the hell happens? What's the worst thing that could happen?" This business owner says no, right? But you've learned something. But again, I haven't figured out, this is the analogy is, leading a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I just encourage everybody to have this moment, test it. And once you get through this, and it just kind of opens doors. Cause I even think about my 6-year journey. I didn't really get to 3 until maybe 4 years into it, right? Then I started saying, "Oh, what the hell? Why can't I do this? Other people with less talent are doing these types of things." And so once we kind of break out of that corporate mold and the box and stay within your lane and those types of things start to open up. Again, my only caution is don't chase too many shiny objects or say, what the hell too many times. But it's a freeing moment, because then once you get there, you realize we really overcomplicate making money outside of corporate. And the more we can normalize this, the better. Because again, I think the world outside of it, where you're not running your life around a corporate job, for me is, I'll never go back. But hopefully, if you folks head down this path, or even if you stay in corporate, redefine it. Hopefully you can put a little bit more in your terms than just the corporate terms. So lastly, and here's my, problem solving sales pitch. Anybody wants to join the collective, it's in the link that I sent you earlier. And what I'm really trying to do here is create a community for folks that, I would say, if you get to that WTF moment, then you're probably right for what we're doing. And this has been an experiment for me over the past 18 months, figuring out where we can add the most value to people going through this journey. It is mostly seasoned corporate escapees. Some are still in corporate, but are itching to get out. Others are, I'd say, the vast majority of the people that just exited or just about to exit and are looking for that community. Because who else are you going to talk to? There's probably not a lot of people in your network that have actually gone through what you're thinking about going through. So it makes sense to have this. If you follow some of my content, you've seen me talk about EscapeeU. What I've decided to do is just roll this EscapeeU into the collective. So on a monthly basis, we're going to do different teaching type of opportunities. So we'll have the networking, the peer groups, all these other things. But what I find has been super helpful for me is actually having somebody to talk to. For the first 2 years, I did this completely on my own, and you get inside your own head. Right? You can tell yourself a lot of different things. Now you got Chat GPT or Claude telling you something else, but just having other folks available to have these conversations. The one thing that we will find you, no matter where you are in your journey, is we meet on a monthly at different peer groups. So folks just getting started, we'll meet with folks getting started. Others that are a little more experienced, we've got a group for them. And again, it's really around creating the community. So I'd love to see you there. If anybody wants to schedule a call to chat more, if it's right for you, happy to have that call as well. But again, my sole mission with this webinar today was just to, and if we can get one other person out of corporate that may have not been thinking about getting out of corporate or was hesitant, to just go test this. So on that, I will open it up. I went a little bit longer than anticipated, but if anybody has any questions, I would love to hear them. James, I see a hand come up.
Hey, Brett. How you doing?
I'm doing
I don't know
well,
if
thanks.
we talked a little while ago. I have 2 questions for you. I think it's on the section 2, but you didn't go into detail on I believe you called it the 2-hour growth strategy. Can you say more about that? There is that offer,
Oh,
2-hour growth strategy workshop.
yeah, that is. Can you again? No matter depending on. Remind me, James. What's your background again?
I mean, I have backgrounds in music, products, management, media.
All right, so let's pick product, right? Product management. Maybe what you offer this small business is a 2-hour workshop on going through their product line, telling them where they should be focused, not focused. And again, I'm completely making this up. But is there something that if you saw on their website that they've got 32 different products and they're a $4 million a year business, they don't need 32 product lines, right? So maybe there's some product management. So anything that you're talking about, is there an opportunity to do a 2-hour workshop within the business? And or if there's a certain area, maybe they've got somebody in product management within the organization, but they're junior. Is there something you can come in and do a half a day or a 2 hour? So I was just trying to flip some ideas of what is something you can do. I mean, if you're a CRM specialist, you can even set up come in and do an audit of their CRM with recommendations on baseline stuff. So that's where I was going with that.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. The other question I had is I really love the idea of choosing my work, being independent, but the problem is like I don't really love the work. Like all the things that I mentioned I'm good at, I don't want to do that anymore, to be honest. So with that, I mean, like if I don't I love the idea of it, but I don't love the work. Have you ever dealt with that? Is the ownership and the ability to call your shots, does that outweigh the dislike of the actual work you're spending your time on? Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I even think about my own journey. The way I looked at it when I escaped, right, and went solo after I convinced, to hire me back into corporate. So when I left corporate for the last time, right, management consulting or the solo consulting was better than the working for the firm, but it wasn't loving it, right? I didn't like the fraction, I didn't like stakeholders and virtual meetings. And then I moved into fractional leadership, which again, I liked better than the fraction or the solo consulting, but it still wasn't what and where I like to spend my time. And it wasn't until got involved with the escapee world and universe. That wasn't even on the radar, right? 2.5 years ago. This gives me a hell of a lot having these types of conversations. I love doing this, right? Now, in a year from now, maybe this isn't what I love, but it's given me the flexibility to move beyond it, right? So I can leverage what I already had. And it was much better than being in corporate, but it wasn't what I wanted to do for the next 20 years. So I think there's a bunch of once you get out, then it opens up the world to, a bunch of different ideas. I'll give you another guy I just came across. I'm trying to get him on the podcast. This guy basically will created a service for folks looking to buy a car. He will negotiate with the dealership. Anybody on TikTok probably has seen him.
Is it young guy?
Yeah, young guy.
Like a
He's
$1,000 or something to negotiate the
charges
deal?
$1,000
Yeah,
and he does 300 deals a month. Think he's
incredible.
making $300,000 a month doing this type of a service. So I'm just saying there's a world of different services that you may find some combination. Replacing that income is the first goal. Hopefully it's in a better opportunity and a better you're in more control going solo, even if it's not your ideal. It gives you a pathway out.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll one more thing and then I'll stop talking. It actually came organically. I have a friend who I'm in Los Angeles. I have a background in the music business and I also have a background in email marketing and he asked me to help him uh with his studio because he knows that email marketing could be a thing. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, and he was gonna pay me too. Well, then he got sick and he was in the hospital and kind of faded away. I don't know, like so like I kind of have like a first customer already, but like I don't know. If anyone has advice about how to like because he's I don't know where he's at health wise, so I don't want to
Yeah.
be I don't want to be like, hey. You know, does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that. And that was my last question. Thanks.
I say maybe him again, it's just a check-in to see how he's doing, but also seeing if there anybody else similar to them, right, running that type of small business you could provide the services to as well, I think could be interesting, right? Just because, hey, I've already set this up. I know how to do this. Even if you don't, right? You can figure out. You've got the skill set to go figure it out and just say, hey, I know this is a gap for these types of companies, and I'm providing a service around this now. Again, test it, right? You can even pre-sell it before you even define exactly what it is. So
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
you got it. I saw a couple more other hands. So quick questions. Yes, I'll send the recording out to everybody that was on registered for this so you can have that. And Craig, I see you're up there with your hand raised.
Yeah, Brett. Thank you so much for going through this. By the way, I really appreciate it. And I guess question I had was like through the entire mission. Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of understand, is it applicable for small business, mid-market, enterprise, all the above kind of thing? Like just trying in terms of like if I look at like some of your best practices and examples and things like that, is it only for a certain segment of the market or is it something more broad?
I think it's broader. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, my passion was that under 10, just because there's so much opportunity and they've just never had access to talent like all the folks on this call. The just models weren't there for them to be able to do that. So I think there's there, but mid-market, I love mid-market too, because I think they've got money, they don't have the red tape, and they do have a lot of needs. I would probably say that becomes level two expertise, right, in a certain area, maybe even three, more of a less likely two. And then within corporate, they're getting smarter about hiring, right, fractionals for certain roles because then they don't have to pay benefits, right? And we've all been part of companies that they can't hire FTEs, but yet they can still spend the same dollars on a contractor, right? So if you can structure the deals out. So I think it's across the board. I just made the decision. I'm never working with the big corporates again, but I do like mid-market. I
Yeah.
think got some unique, definitely some opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and I think yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, I've always worked for large tech companies in consulting, and especially large tech companies. But I'm talking about like who to target out, like you know, other large enterprises or mid market. And I think the large enterprise customers, whether it's tech or financial services or manufacturing, it's pretty saturated because you have all the big consulting firms doing a lot of what I do. So I see mid market as more kind of untapped and underserved, depending on what the service offerings and things like that. So that's why I'm asking. That's kind of where my experience is been.
Yeah, no, and again, I like mid-market. Again, if I was going back over and was going to focus on the consulting side, even the fractional side, I'd probably be looking at it because they, again, they've got the money, they've gotten past the scale portion of it. And again, I think the CFO becomes all of our best friends, right? Because they can't execute a lot of the things. They may not have those resources internally. And I don't care if it's in technology, human resources, wherever it is that, yeah, because again, McKinsey and those companies aren't going into those. They're not dipping down that low. Consulting space is then going to be in a mess for a while, which I think that's going to create some opportunities. But yeah, so I think if you want small business, it's more repeatable, it's scalable, it's foundational. But I think the mid market creates good long term opportunities just because if they can take advantage of where AI is going, they can take advantage of some things where the big enterprises just can't turn, right? They've almost got to implode before they're going to be able to take advantage of some of these. And I think if you can get one or two mid-market, all of a sudden that just opens up a door. And you wouldn't need more than a couple for that to really work.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much.
Now you got it. I see one last hand, Rich. You still out there?
Yeah. Hey, Brett. Hey, thanks a lot. Um, can you go back to, I love that slide where you talk about pricing because, I've been evaluating the fractional CMO model, right? And they'll, to throw out something, well, you can bill, a recurring retainer 30 to $50,000 a month. But as a fractional CMO, I'm not going to be building out the website, right? I need to farm that out. I need to farm out SEO, paid per click, media buying. So all those are going to eat into my margins, into my pricing. So I love this slide because you really break down what's realistic. And some of these fractional coaches, not John, but some of them will say, yeah, once you get one or two, three clients at a run rate of 30, 40, 50,000 a month, you're set. But they're not taking into account, when I was in corporate and I had that budget, if I had a $30,000 retainer, I had an agency at my disposal.
Right.
So that's the difference. That's why I think this slide is key to have to back into that number. You're not going to go to Upwork or Fiverr to
Right.
find these resources. You're going to have to pay them a significant amount. So I just want to say I love this slide and I'll be taking a screenshot of it.
Good. Yeah. And again, I think the other thing that I've learned, the analogy for the folks still hanging on the call because I think the future of work is heading in towards more of, and I've been using like a home builder, right? As you're building a business. And I think we can take the sub functions like marketing. Marketing isn't just marketing, right? It's branding, it's lead gen, you name it. It's got a host of customer experience can be bundled in there. And if you're a business owner, they need you, right, as the general contractor to go help me go find these resources. And
Yeah.
so, restructuring our time. And again, I like to think I could be the overall general contractor. If I'm building a house, you don't need to hire a full-time electrician or a full-time plumber. You need them more on demand and maybe a project, whatever it is. So I think that's where, again, folks on this call have a huge advantage is
Mm,
understanding that and being able to plug in and pull the resources they need. Needs still somebody because a business owner doesn't know. Again, I would say 90% of business owners I talk to think they need to hire a head of sales before anything else. Possible, but not likely, right? There's a
yeah.
host of other things you need to get done, but why hire full-time people when you can plug in? So, and I know you mentioned John, I love John, but again, I'm not a label guy. I'm like, 'cause business owner, they don't care. They just want to know what do I need to spend and who's going to take care of this type of things. Like I said, I think we're in a really good position, and the folks that get into this early will have a lot more options. We're so early in this thing, right? But it's starting the education process. Again, you don't have to sell a business owner and fractional. You just share the house, building a house analogy. It's like building a business, right? I can help you find those resources you need when you need them. You just need to pay me out in the retainer to help you figure out what you need as you go through the process. So I know took us down a rabbit hole there, but I think it's good insights for folks. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for sticking around, and I appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, I get some link to LinkedIn. You set up a chat with me if you want. Hopefully, we'll see a few of you in the collective. But if not, good luck with everything. And then, like I said, email me if you guys have any questions. I'm always happy to help. Cool. All right, everybody, have a good weekend. Thanks.